this awakeness is very ordinary. We make it complicated. It's the natural state of being human. It's what happens as consciousness reveals itself through the many veils that accumulate over a lifetime or lifetimes. But it's not a state to achieve. It's not something to find or to claim. It's actually what's already here. So it's like it peeks its head through the many obscurations, the many layers of erroneous perception. And I'm sure you've heard all this before. But somehow we need to be reminded, because even though it's ordinary, it's our natural birthright, it's very simple, there's something in us that makes it not so simple. There's something obviously complicated, complex along that process of dissolving the veils of perception. Otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here having these kind of meetings. So if this awakeness is to be something more than a state which comes and goes, and these days so many people are having awakening experiences. So like almost everyone I speak to has had an awakening experience. But if it's to be more than that, more than a temporary state which somehow slips out of your grasp, when the world comes flooding back in, when your life comes flooding back in, when your personality comes flooding back in, if it's to be more than that fleeting state, that glimpse of something precious, that taste of fulfillment and at-homeness, if it's to be more than just a glimpse, something more is required. It's like the arrow of inquiry needs to penetrate beyond mind and beyond heart, or through mind, through heart, and anchor itself in the belly, in your gut. There needs to be a total revolution of consciousness. So that awakeness becomes your living reality and can then be experienced, lived, known, recognized as the ordinary human state. Nothing more, nothing less. But until it changes everything from the inside out, until that complete revolution, inner revolution happens, then it's nothing more than a state that comes and goes. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's where it gets tricky. Yeah. That's where it gets tricky. Because once glimpsed, there's the desire to hold on to it. And when lost, there's the momentum to look for it again. And both those mechanisms are obstacles to its true revelation. Because the horizontal mechanism of mind, egoic mind, has kicked in again. And that's precisely what needs to transform. That's precisely what needs to be consumed totally in the light of awakeness. That horizontal mental masturbation, backwards and forwards, with no real fulfillment. And yet it's precisely that mechanism that we eventually become sick of, that eventually creates so much psychological suffering that the whole seeking for something beyond that begins. So that very mechanism is the grit in the oyster that creates the pearl. But eventually the pearl must emerge, must grow. And that pearl is the complete transformation of consciousness that is all tied up in this egoic movement. It's a freeing of consciousness from the knot of egoic identification. And when that is freed, it's not necessarily a mystical experience. It's not necessarily a transcendent experience. It's not a special state. It's not a magical state. It's freedom. The innocent freedom that is already who you are. That which was known, although not consciously recognized when you were born, when you emerged from the womb. It's so natural. It's an innocence, a freshness, an openness. An intimacy with life that doesn't exclude the messiness of the human experience. doesn't exclude the emotions, doesn't exclude the body, doesn't exclude relationship. Doesn't exclude anything on the earthly dimension. Freedom, awakening, enlightenment, call it what you will, brings you closer, closer to what is. Not above it or beyond it. So close that what is inside of you. The world is inside of you. Everything. Is in you. So when the knot of egoic identification is freed from this location in time and space, it's as if the self becomes unlocalized. The I continues to operate. As long as you're alive, there is still an I. Sense of I-ness. Otherwise you wouldn't be able to operate in three-dimensional reality. But that sense of I-ness is freed from the prison of unconscious identification with cultural, personal, social conditioning. It's freed from that. It's freed from being in the prison of being outside of the world, separate from anything. It's as if the I merges into the totality. So yes, the personality continues to operate. The ego continues to operate. The body continues to operate. All the functions of a human being as an apparently separate self continue to operate. But the transformation is that all of that becomes very permeable, very transparent, very open. And that openness is an intimacy with what is, with life, that's so close that you can't even call it intimacy, because intimacy implies that there's a you and an other. So the words aren't quite accurate, but are pointing to something that is beyond the words. It's so intimate. And that intimacy makes us vulnerable. Just as a little baby is vulnerable, so open. And it's that vulnerability that we're so scared of. Because everything that we think we are is the opposite of that. It's the layers of protection, the scaffolding that we have been conditioned to erect around this open, innocent vulnerability. Part of it necessary as we maneuver through the world, and part of it rigidified into a prison with the illusion of safety. But there is no real safety in that, because the scaffolding can be knocked down. Can be harmed, can be dented, can be attacked, can be washed away, can be rocked. But when there's no scaffolding there, there's just open space. You become invulnerable. Yeah, vulnerability is the doorway to invulnerability. You become invulnerable to the ever-changing tides of life. And it's that invulnerability that is the source or the ground of true fulfillment. It's a resting place. It's not the invulnerability of putting up a shield. It's not a war. It's not a battle. It's complete surrender. Everything surrenders to awakeness. And we could substitute the word openness with awakeness. Everything is surrendered to that ego, personality. Everything that you think you are, your whole life is surrendered to that awakeness, to that openness, to that intimacy. So this brings me right back to the beginning about these awakening states that come and go. If it is to be more than that, if it is to create real change in your life as your living reality and have real impact, then a deeper surrender is required, even after an awakening experience. Whether that experience or state lasts for a few moments, several months, or even several years. The continuation of surrender, conscious surrender, which demands a vigilance to a deeper inquiry. As you continue to operate in life, in the world, is required. And although that sounds like there's a lot of effort in it, it actually becomes effortless because it's your natural state. That which is awake in you is pulled towards itself. Until eventually there is nothing else. Awakeness falls into itself and becomes the natural state. Because It already is. So this whole little process, if you like, or journey that I've sort of described, is really a purification of everything that stands in the way, all the veils of perception that prevent this natural state, your human birthright, from being recognized, seen, lived, breathed in every cell of your being, in every moment of your life. So what's complex is not the achievement of some transcendent awakened state, but the little tricks and twists and turns that egoic mind or conditioned self will hold up as this purification process starts to consume everything that stands in the way of it. There will be an ongoing little battle going on until all division is dissolved. So any attempt to hold on to an awakened state, any attempt to identify with that awakened state, any attempt to cherish that awakened state as an achievement, as a blessing, something to be worshipped, any attempt to do that creates another layer, another veil that needs to be purified. Because this surrender, this deeper living of the truth of awakeness from the belly, from the gut, demands a radical letting go of all attempts to hold on to any form. And that form includes the form of your thoughts, the form of your beliefs, the form of your hopes, and the form of your fears, the form of your emotions. Whilst all these continue to flow through you as part of the human experience, the attempt to hold on to them, to find solace in them, to cherish them, to worship them, creates more suffering, more obstacles, and simply delays the revelation of that which you already are. So the surrender requires the death of all attachment to form. And yet all these forms continue to dance through you. They're not denied. You don't become a vacuum. The realization of emptiness as your true nature is not empty. It's full. At least as long as you're alive. That's the great paradox. So you live like a Zorba the Buddha. Yeah, you know Zorba the Greek? That movie? He was really lost in his senses. Passionate, but living life to the full, but on a sensorial level. Yeah, to be a Zorba the Buddha, well, you know who Buddha is, so, is to be truly, utterly anchored in Buddha nature. The realization of emptiness as the ground of being, the beingness that you are, beyond all forms, beyond the form of your body, beyond the form of your thinking, beyond the form of your feeling. You are that. To be truly anchored in the realization of that, unwaveringly, and to live life fully by being intimate with the bittersweet nature of the human experience. Not to get lost in the world, not to get lost in the story of the world, but to meet wholeheartedly the world without a story. That's a Zorba the Buddha. It's neither detachment nor attachment. Something much vaster and more magnificent than that. But in order to be totally intimate with life, in order to be able to embrace the crazy paradox of both emptiness and fullness, emptiness has to be fully realized. Silence has to be fully seen, recognized. And that means everything that stands in the way of that must be given to the flame, to the light of awakeness. And that means every vestige of division in you must be dissolved, so that even when personality continues to function, as it inevitably will, you are not divided from that. Neither are you totally identified with it. In fact, you're not identified with it at all. That very non-identification dissolves the division. Because there's no fight anymore. You're not fighting your personality. You're not fighting the bits you don't like. You're not fixing anything. You're not looking for anything more. That doesn't mean you become passive. Doesn't mean you don't learn and grow and polish the diamond of who you are. All that continues and should continue. But there's a radical transformation. That which is being polished is given in service to awakeness. You're not trying to heal your traumas or improve your personality. Or undo negative beliefs in order to become a better person. You're not doing it because of that. If you are doing that, it's in order to polish the diamond. So that the facets of that diamond, the faces of that diamond, become clear windows for the emanation of light from within. So it becomes in service to that light.